Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Leviticus. We have started the introduction yesterday, and we continue on from verse 3. But by way of review, I think all of us need to learn a little bit of Hebrew. And so let me just bring to your attention two things in verse 2. Now, in verse 2, we have this word to bring. And this word comes from the word uh, karaf. Karaf. At the same time, you find that there is a word that we use here that is this word offering. And let me just highlight this offering. And this word is korban. And just a little bit of vocabulary here. This is an Eastern Oriental idea. The word karaf is to draw close or draw near, approach. In Eastern Oriental culture, very much like ours, when you come near or visit a friend, you will bring something. And the something that you bring is called korban. And this is a gift. These two words are interrelated. This is a verb and this is a noun. And so karaf and korban, although it may sound a bit different in our non-Hebrew ears, but you have to understand that the basic words come from the same root. The drawing near or approaching is fundamentally giving us an idea that when you see a person, you will always bring a gift. And basically in our traditions today as well, when you visit a friend, you don't go empty-handed. You buy a present, a gift. And this is what it means when you come near to God, you will bring an offering to God. And this word here, bring your offering, essentially comes at the back. And this is a plural word, and this is a singular word. And this gives us an idea that it is not a one man, one offering. It can be something called communal, meaning the whole group can bring one gift. And that would be where we left off in verse 2. We continue in verse 3. It says, if. It begins in chapter 1 to give us a flavor of offerings. What gifts do you bring to God? When you go and visit a friend, you bring a present. And in Leviticus chapter 1, when you come near and you visit God at the tabernacle of meeting, or Hel Moed, where God is represented, where God is saying to be in their midst, then you bring a gift, a korban, that is, and this word here, a burnt offering. So you need to understand this burnt offering is olah. You bring an olah, which is your korban, from your herd. Notice the herd or the flock. Later on, we'll talk about the flock. And this is your bakar. Now, these are all Hebrew words. Why are they important to us? They are important because the English language is not adequate to express its entire meaning. So we have touched on karaf, we have touched on korban, and so let's look at olah. Olah, although translated as burnt offering, it literally means something that rises up. You've heard of the term aliyah, comes from the same root, the going up. So olah also tells us that something is going up. What is going up? When the fire is burnt or is burning, you find that what goes up is actually smoke. Now, the second thing that goes up is aroma. And so these are things that rises up. And that is what is referred to as a burnt sacrifice. When this person, and this is a person, let him come and make the sacrifice. And when you approach God, you bring your offering and you offer it in verse 3 as a male, and it is complete. This word without blemish means it's complete, it's perfect. Now, we don't use this word very much, but the Bible uses this word a lot. In fact, this word here is tamim. You see this word particularly, say, in the book of Malachi, chapter 1, where the Kohanim, the priests, were bringing incomplete or imperfect offerings to God, where the animal was blind, was cropped, was lame, and that's blemish. And so God says, you bring it within your flock. First of all, make sure your big animal, in this case, would be an ox or a bull, uh, because it's male, it has to be perfect. And you have to offer it. And here is another word we need to spend some time on his own free will. Now, this idea of an own free will literally means uh, ratson, right? Ratson. And it means literally uh, good pleasure, that you are happy to bring it. And so the term free will, you are not forced to do it. It is not a compulsion. It is not by law. You are doing it because you want to do it. And so you bring it, and you should bring it to the opening of the tabernacle of meeting, to the face of God, or to the faces. Because you're coming to visit God, and so you bring a present. And God says, you come to my house, you follow my rules. The rules is that it needs to be a male and it needs to be perfect. And you need to come and do it because you want to do it. And that's what it means by own free will. That's ratson. Now we go on and says, and when you do that, you will have to put your hand on the head of the burnt offering. The idea of put your hand is to rest your hands. Rest your hands on the head of the bakar. which is your ox, right? Because it's male, it's not a cow, it's an ox. And then it says here in verse 4, and that it will be accepted on his behalf. Now, this word accepted is also important, because this word accepted is the word ratsa. So we have ratsa, and then we have ratson. You notice these are very peculiar words. I'm trying to help us understand. Ratson is the noun. Ratsa is the verb. And so it will be freely accepted by God on his behalf to make atonement for him. And so we have a new word here. The word here is atonement. This is the first time you're seeing this. And this word is kafar. Now, kafar means to cover. That's all it ever means. A covering. It will be freely accepted by God to make a covering for him. Now, one of the things that you find is that we don't see an indication of any particular sins. That is something that we have not read in chapter 1. God says that he is coming with his own free will, Ratson. And by doing that, if he follows all the rules, it will be Ratsa. And it will be Ratsa to kafar him. And so it is understood here that it is not any particular sins that has a compulsion for an offering. It is not a particular sin that is prescribed in the law that will have a particular punishment. And so this would be a situation where he feels that he has done something wrong, but it is not provided for in the law. But he feels very convicted that he would need to bring an offering to atone for that. Now, let me give an example. For example, in the Pesach, when you're supposed to have the eating of the lamb, and you should not leave the lamb for overnight, but you did. Well, there's no prescription to cane you or to stone you or to judge you, but you have not complied fully to the description of the eating of the Pesach meal. And so this person feels bad about it, comes to see God, and brings this olah as a korban to offer to God to make peace with God. And so God gives and provides for the offering. So you will kill the bull, right? It is an ox. It's not a cow. Now, let me explain this to you. He shall kill the bull. He shall slaughter the bull. Now, yesterday we spoke about the written Torah and the oral Torah. What we read here are the high level outlines of what needs to be done. The details are not written here, and we call them the oral Torah. Now, why do the Jews do that to separate between the written Torah and the oral Torah? Is here. Look at this word. He shall slaughter the bull before the Lord. The question would be this: how do you slaughter? What are the prescriptions to slaughter? Do you take a small knife, a big knife, one stroke, many strokes? How do you hold the ox down? If it turns violent, what happens if he doesn't die in the first stroke? How do you empty the animal of all the blood? This one word, he shall slaughter, does not give us any prescription details. And hence, how will they know what to do? And so they will refer to the oral Torah. And that is why to practice the rituals, to practice God's rules, the details come from the oral Torah. The written Torah, as we are reading now, gives us the idea of what is to be done, but how it's to be done is not written down. And that is why I hope that we can actually tell the difference. So he shall kill or slaughter the bull, and that comes from the oral traditions, before God. Now it moves from he to the Kohanim. Aaron's sons shall bring the blood and sprinkle the blood all around on the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of the meeting. So now we have a second group of people who are supposed to do something. The person can slaughter the bull. The priest can also do that, but it does provide that the person who brings the korban, can actually do the slaughtering. And the priest will take the blood. Now, where do you contain the blood? How do you keep the blood? How do you funnel the blood out of the animal? That's the question that needs to be asked. And all this will come from the oral Torah. How do you sprinkle the blood all around the altar? And it's a big altar by the door of the tabernacle of meeting. This is telling us where the altar is situated. Now we have verse 6. When we come to verse 6, you'll find that, and then he. Now understand that we don't have a strict order. You bring the bull. Do you kill the bull first? Do you put the hand on the head of the bull? Do the priest come and collect the blood after? Does it set it on the altar and he shall skin the burnt offering and cut it into its pieces? So all of these are just to give us an idea what's actually happening. To cut it into its pieces means at the joints. It is not chopping it up randomly, but splitting the limbs by itself, the joints, basically. And there will be many pieces. It is the role of the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron. He shall put it on the fire on the altar. Lay the wood in order on the fire. And so the wood must be laid first before the parts. And then the priest, the Aaron's son, shall lay the parts, the head, the fat in order on the wood that is on the fire upon the altar. And so you find that this fat is a layer fat. It's a layer of fat that is under the skin. The difference is this. The pagans would put the fat on top of the animal, but God wants the fat to be at the bottom, right? It is the fat would be on the wood in verse 8. Now it's interesting is because this will help ignite the wood, that the fire will be then ignited upon the altar. So you find that you have the altar, the wood, the fat, the head, and the parts. And then the fire comes out And then you find that the aroma of the fat and the smoke goes up, and hence this is called the olah, the burnt offering. Now we have an additional piece of information right here. It says in verse 9, but he shall wash the innards and the legs with water, and the priest shall burn all on the altar as an olah. Now this is this word olah here, as an olah. And then it is an offering. You find that this word offering, made by fire, is one word. An offering made by fire is one word. It is ish, ishe. It is ishe. It is something that is dealt with by fire. The focus here is this word fire. And when you do that, then there will be an aroma. And so we need to know this word here. The word aroma is reak. Reak. As opposed to wind or breath, and that would be ruach. Now, obviously, you have heard of the word ruach because it is usually translated as spirit, but I would prefer us to stick to the original meaning, which is wind or breath. And so, reach will be the smell that is from the breath. And this reach is actually coming from the idea of nihoak. So let me just explain this. We have the aroma, and then we have uh, the idea of appeasement. This is nihoak, uh, and it's not really the word aroma here. Uh, this whole word here is a problem, right? This whole word here is a problem. So let me just put it here. This is the reak ni hoak. This would be the two words. This would be the smell of appeasement. The smell that will give a sense of calmness. This is a smell that gives a sense of a a sense of a tranquility, a sense of satisfaction. I think that would be a much better word. This sweet aroma is a much bigger picture by it. So when the fire burns the fat and the animal, and the smoke rises up, and so does a smell, and this is the smell of appeasement, God will be soothed. God will be happy. And so God says that when you bring it on your own happiness, I will be more than happy to accept the kafar to cover whatever sins you feel that you have done wrong. That has no prescription. And this smell that reaches God as it goes up, God will be happy. Now, this whole picture of the korban, of an olah, is very important in its concept because this first portion is about a happy gift. that you are bringing it not because you are forced to by law, but you feel that you need to do something, that you have done something wrong, but it's not really terribly wrong. It is not something that you've done it on purpose, perhaps. And so this is that kind of a gentle error, perhaps, but you are not feeling at peace. And so this is what this first part of the Ola, where you bring the big animal to God. So remember, the Korban is because you karaf as an Eastern Oriental practice that you always bring a gift when you visit. And so this is the gift you bring to visit God. And it's a free will gift that you're happy to bring because there is no compulsion for you to do it. And the kind of sin would be simple things that is not written in the law that there is any particular punishment for. In our second part from verse 10, it says, but if his korban, right, if his korban is from the zone, these are the smaller animals. What are the smaller animals that we're talking about? It is this word here is not sheep. Please bear in mind, this word here is young ram, male sheep, right? Male sheep has horns, or of the goats. And in this case, we are also talking about male goats. As an olah, he shall bring a male, and it has to be perfect. Now, one of the things you find that is different when you have a young ram and the young ram of the Kesef, the young ram, the ram has horns. And you'll find that it is not dealt with here. And so we are made to understand that the animals is killed, but the horns is used for a shofar. It is not burnt. The rest of the animals is burnt. And so now in verse 11, again, we have this, he shall slaughter. And how you slaughter, we don't know, but it is slaughtered. So we have to follow, the Jews will have to follow, the Israelites will have to follow the oral tradition. On the side of the altar before God, and the Kohanim, Aaron's sons, shall sprinkle the blood all around on the altar. And then he shall cut it into pieces. And notice this will be cut at the joints, not a random chopping. And then it says here, with its head and its fat, and the Kohanim shall lay them in order on the wood, that is, on the fire upon the altar. Now, it is important that you find that they are laying in on the wood. In verse 12, which is similar to the ones before. But he shall wash the innards and the licks with water, and then the priest shall bring it all and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice. Now, this word here, a burnt sacrifice, again, we have this. A burnt sacrifice is an olah. So let me break it down again. We have the same order. The burnt sacrifice is an olah. And then we have an offering made by fire. The focus here is fire. This is one word. This is Ishe. Now, the next part here are two words, sweet aroma. The idea of sweet aroma is reak, not reach, it's reak. And then it is ni ho ak, right? Ni ho ak. This is actually a smell of appeasement, a smell of consoling. It comes from the word Noah. Noah. It is about rest. It is about being at peace. And so this is a sweet aroma that is sent up to Jehovah. So now we have one of the big animals, then we have the small animals, and I have also highlighted to you that the ram horns are not burned. The ram horns are going to be used as a shofar, but it's not in the text. And so part of the oral traditions, and we are told that there is no particular words here that deals with the horns, but because it is a male sheep, a young ram, its horns are to be kept for other purposes, not to be burnt. Now, finally, we come to the last part. Our last part here is in verse 14. Now, verse 14 says, if the olah of his korban to God, to Jehovah, is of birds with wings, creatures with wings, and then he shall approach God with his offering of turtle doves or doves. And then he says here, or the son of the dove or the pigeon. And now, this word pigeon is Yonah. It is also a word for pigeon, but these are all similar birds. Yonah is from the prophet Jonah. So these are little gentle birds, and they are used for offering, for korban. And then we read of how it should be treated. The Kohen shall bring it to the altar. And then it says, bring it to the altar means he has to go up to the altar. And so he should be up here with the bird. It is not done below. So he's up there with the bird. And then we have this idea of nip off the head, ring off its head, or nip off the head. It is the idea of killing a bird by wringing off its head, by twisting and breaking the neck, in that sense. This is what it means by wring, right? By nipping off the head and then burn it on the altar. Now, notice all of these are the big outlines. And how do you do it? You need to make sure that the blood be drained out on the side of the altar. So the idea of draining blood is to cause the blood to drip off the bird. how do you actually do it? So there would be oral traditions. And then he shall remove its crop. What is the crop? Now understand the idea of crop here would be all the things that is inside the bird in verse 16. What is inside the bird and what is also uh, with its feathers. So what's inside and with its feathers. So the crop would be what you, well, I guess, what you don't want of a bird. What is the crop, or how should we say this? We only see this word once actually here. Uh, and the picture here is something that you you don't want. The things that you don't want. So it will refer to uh, the insides of the bird with its feathers. That's what you don't want as well. And then cast it beside the altar on the east side into the place for the ashes. And so the east side would be here, where the ashes are. And so they would throw it all down. And this is the opening of the tabernacle. Verse 17, and then he shall split apart at its wings. This idea of split means you are to divide. Because it is a small animal or small bird, this would be to tear apart at the wings. But after you tear it apart, notice what it says. You shall not completely remove it. So you just break it at the wings, but you are not splitting it completely apart. And then the priest shall burn it on the altar, on the wood that is on the fire. And so this is now called an olah. It is also an offering made by fire. It is an ishe. And then it is a sweet aroma to the Lord. It is also the reyak. Then we have the second word here is nihoak. The smell of appeasement. The smell of rest. That God Himself, who requested it, will smell the fat that is being burned with the meat and the smoke that rises up of the olah. And God tells us that once that is done, with all the protocols, all the rules followed, that God will be happy. God will be restful. God will be at ease. That is what it means. We have seen in this chapter of Olah, with regards to sins that are not particularly highlighted with punishment, things that is done wrong, but it is not major, it is unintentional, and that the person who did it is happy to come to God with an olah, to offer a korban of three types of animals. the big ones, a bull or an ox. The second one would be a ram or a goat, a male goat, all perfect, or a dove. So the question would be, is it an option that you can choose which ones to bring? Yes. And this means that if you are rich, you can bring a more expensive animal, the big ones. Not so rich, you have a smaller animal. But if you have really no money and yet you want to come to God, you can bring a dove or a son of a pigeon, a small little bird. And God will be happy. And the Kohen will have rules as to how to deal with each of the animals. So in chapter 1, we are talking about an olah. It is to be a ratzon. It has to be done on free will, on that you're happy to do it. You're not forced to do it by law. There is no compulsion. And then God will be happy to kafar, to cover those sins, that he will not take note of it. And the aroma, the smoke that goes up to the heavens, God will be restful. He will be at ease. He will be at rest. He will be happy to cover and not look at that kind of a sin any longer. And so that's God's house. When you come to see God and you want to deal with some form of an unintentional sin, a minor issue, and yet you feel that you need to deal with God, well, the prescription or the protocol is there. God's house, God's rules. Follow what he wants. The details are left for the Kohanim, the priest, to do exactly what it is. We are not told, but they would know what to do. And then God will be happy. And that would be the end of chapter 1.